Welcome to U.S. Immigration TV. Well, beginning May 7, 2025, TSA will finally start enforcing the Real ID Act, requiring Real ID compliant identification in order for a person to board a domestic flight. That means within the U.S. Now, the main form of identification typically presented at airports for domestic flights is a person's state-issued driver's license, and they typically have stars in the upper right corner. However, in order to obtain a Real ID driver's license, the person must demonstrate that they are in lawful status. Okay, but what about people who are out of status and therefore they are unable to obtain a Real ID compliant driver's license? So how are they going to be able to travel on a domestic flight? Is there some other form of identification that they can provide to TSA? Well, watch this video for answers. Now, a little bit of background. In 2005, Congress passed the Real ID Act in the aftermath of 9/11, and that required that the federal government, and I quote, set standards for the issuance of sources of identification such as driver's license, unquote. Now, that act, the Real ID Act, established minimum security standards for state-issued driver's license and who would be eligible to obtain those driver's licenses. Now, most importantly, for many of you out there watching, one of the requirements was that the person must provide proof of lawful status. Now, as I said before, a Real ID compliant driver's license would typically have a star at the upper top portion of the card. And although the act was passed in 2005, its enforcement has been postponed, extended, and delayed now for almost 20 years. But starting May 7, 2025, a person will need to present a Real ID compliant driver's license or other acceptable forms of identification in order for a person to board a domestic flight, that means within the U.S., or to be able to enter federal facilities. Now, I've received many inquiries from people who are out of status and therefore they're not eligible for Real ID compliant driver's license. And they're asking, how can they now travel within the U.S. on a commercial aircraft? Well, there is good news. The TSA on its website has listed several alternate documents that can be presented to TSA at the airport in lieu of or instead of a Real ID compliant driver's license. Now, one of the acceptable documents is a foreign government issued passport. In other words, let's say a Filipino wants to fly within the U.S., they can present the picture page of their unexpired Philippine passport instead of a Real ID compliant driver's license, and they would be able to board the flight. Now, TSA is not supposed to be checking legal status, visas, or anything else. And as I said, TSA on its website listed the acceptable documents to be able to board a plane, which includes a foreign government issued passport. Now, I want to caution people who are out of status, so there's no confusion, no misunderstanding. I am discussing in this video only a person's ability to fly within the U.S. or domestically. If you are out of status, you cannot fly internationally or outside the U.S. In other words, you can't use your Philippine passport to fly to the Philippines and come back. Otherwise, if you fly internationally and you're out of status, you could be banned from returning to the U.S. for between 3 and 10 years. And I also want to be clear that some states were issuing driver privilege documents to undocumented aliens. And that was like, for example, AB 60 driving privilege document in California. Now, those driver's license or ID are not Real ID compliant. While most people who are out of status may still be able to fly domestically or within the U.S. using their foreign government issued passport, I see that, me personally, I see that as only a temporary fix or workaround for your situation. What you really need to try to do and solve, and the real problem, no pun intended, is to finally find a way to legalize your status. You may want to consult with an immigration attorney who could evaluate your circumstance, and perhaps there could be pagasa, there could be hope, there could be a pathway for you to legalize your status so that you may be able to obtain real ID and a real life in the U.S. Now, I hope you found this video helpful, informative, especially for you who are worrying about how you'd be able to travel after May 2025. As you can see, foreign government issued passport. And I will continue monitoring the immigration developments, especially under this time of Trump, where people are actually afraid to travel, whether it is somebody out of status flying domestically. I am even getting many inquiries about green card holders and U.S. citizens afraid to fly outside the U.S. That's why make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel to be updated on the latest immigration news and developments during Trump's administration. I'm Michael Gurfinkel, and thank you for watching U.S. Immigration TV.